Welcome to This Day Live, the Sunday talk show. Oh, I'm sorry, I still have my face mask on. This becomes effective from tomorrow in Nigeria, according to presidential directive. But for the purposes of this program, it may affect the audio. Well, welcome again to This Day Live, the Sunday talk show, where we discuss all things political, bringing you the top stories locally, nationally, and from around the world. I'm Ruben Abati, and This Day Live begins now. I'd like to welcome today's panelists. Yemi Adamolekun, Executive Director, Enough is Enough. Well, Yemi, I see you also have your mask on. I think that's public people. Enlightenment, to remind people that from tomorrow they have to use the face mask. I'm Professor Bola Akintenwa, Director General, Bolitag Center for International Diplomacy and Strategic Studies. Professor Akintenwa, I see you are also COVID-19 compliant.
Yes, we are.
Yes,
but
I guess everyone should know that it's not just about the face mask. You should also observe physical distancing, social distancing, personal hygiene. These are the guidelines that have been offered by the Nigerian government.
Unless you have to.
Stay home
if
you don't have to go out.
Yes.
You are absolutely correct.
It's the most important bit.
Yes, but let's begin with COVID-19, which is the main subject of the world. We begin with the latest situation report of the spread of coronavirus in Nigeria. On Saturday, the Nigeria Center for Disease Control confirmed 2020 new cases. This has brought the national tally to 2,388. Currently, there are 385 discharged cases, and the number of deaths increased by 17, bringing it to a total of 85. The 2020 new cases confirmed on Saturday were from 27 states. A breakdown shows Lagos with 62, FCT 52, Kaduna 31, Sokoto 13, Kebbi 10, Yobe 9, Borno 6, Edo and Bauchi states has 5 cases each, while Gombe, Enugu and Oyo has 4 cases each. Zamfara currently has 3 cases, while Nasarawa, Osun, Ebonyi, Kwara, Kano, and Plateau have 2 cases each. The disease has not yet been reported in Cross River State and Kogi State. And here is the latest global picture of the global 19 pandemic. So, as we have seen, the seroprevalence of COVID-19 continues to go up. But there are very critical issues in Nigeria. The big issue is that by tomorrow, the federal government has directed that in Lagos, Ogun, and the FCT, there should be a relaxation of the lockdown. Ogun State has said because he joined a week late, he should be allowed to ease the lockdown from May 10. And the effective date for Ogun State is May 10. Now, other state governors have followed the cue of the president. And they've decided that, look, it was time already for the relaxation of the lockdown. For example, in Delta State, the governor has said, yes, church services, Friday mosque prayers can take place, provided that people observe social distancing. In Lagos, the governor has also offered a long list of guidelines as to businesses that can reopen and what should be observed. Now, but the big argument is about the lockdown itself. Some people are saying, does it make sense to ease the lockdown, particularly in a place like Kano State, where we have had very mysterious and surprising and almost mythical spike in the number of deaths. But you have the federal government saying on one hand that Kano State should be locked down, and then you have the governor saying he needs support. He does not only need support for purposes of Ramadan, the lockdown should be eased. So you have all these contradictions in terms of how government is managing it. But we have seen in Germany where the lockdown was eased and then the numbers spiked. We have also seen a similar situation in various states in the United States, particularly in the state of Georgia, where Governor Kemp said, okay, we cannot afford to lock down businesses, and the number of infectious cases just went up. Is Nigeria taking the right decision to ease restrictions? Should we be more cautious? Should we lay more emphasis on patience rather than saying, oh, the people are restless, they need to go out to work? Let me start with you, Yemi.
Mm-hmm. Well, we've said this on the show over the weeks, that part of our challenge, a core part of the challenge that we have is a lack of leadership. Our president is missing in action. And,
no, I don't agree with that. It's not missing in action.
But that's your opinion, and it's fine. My opinion, which is what I am stating, not yours, not This Day Lives, not Arises, my opinion is that our president is missing in action. And I stand by that. Number one. And because of that, as a fallout from that, unfortunately, we then lost the chief of staff, who was a critical part of his cabinet in articulating and sort of shaping strategy, as we've been made to understand over the years. Thirdly, we have a presidential task force that's headed by the secretary to the federal government that is, I would say, quite frankly, a bit out of its depth. And then we have an economic council that's headed by the vice president. 2 weeks ago, a civil society coalition that I'm a part of had asked that since the PTF seems to be struggling, that it be collapsed with the economic council into one combined entity that can provide a strategic direction for the company, or for the country, headed by the vice president. And this was also on the back of the manner in which Abba Kyari's funeral was handled. To where we are today, and as you've said, you've laid down the contradictory voices of the states who don't seem to have a good grasp of what they are doing. And it's a bit understandable, because even though we run as a federation and states make their own decision, Nigeria has run more as a unitary state that takes directions from the center. So when the center is rudderless, states then become even more so. I'll use Kaduna as an example, where the governor has been very clear that understanding that we do not have the capacity to deal with an outbreak, they were very aggressive in preventing it from the start. And he's been very lucky. His deputy governor is a public health specialist. His commissioner of health is also a public health specialist. So in his own words, they were able to sufficiently scare them enough in EXCO about the challenges they would have if they didn't take it seriously. He has extended his lockdown for 30 days. He has closed his borders to traffic, even to essential services. He says at night that they will not be allowed to enter, for the simple reason that people were using the cover of night to smuggle people into Kaduna. So even though essential services are allowed, at night they will not be allowed into the state. And we've seen also, and to also sort of emphasize his point, he's used religious institutions. You mentioned Delta relaxing. He has said if any mosque or church has a Jumat prayer or a service, he will demolish the building, just really to communicate. It can be considered dictatorial, but I think in certain situations, signaling in that sense is very strong in letting people know that I take this the state takes this very seriously, and we will respond accordingly. Now, I say all that to say we have discordant noises from states. We have a federal government that's missing in action. We have a state like Kaduna that has decided to protect its residents. At a webinar that I was a part of, it was asked about lives versus livelihoods. And he made the point that you can't have livelihoods without lives. That in your actually, it's Obiase Ekwesili that said that in a different conversation, that in their sequencing, lives come before livelihoods. So you have to focus on lives. And Malam El-Rufai also said the same thing. You now take a state like Kano, which is where I will stop, where Kaduna has been very, in sort of Nigerian parlance, gangster with his response to it. The governor of Kano has been completely irresponsible. I don't know if it's irresponsible I want to use. Yes.
No, what is the word you use? Responsible or irresponsible?
Oh, irresponsible.
Okay.
I don't know if it's
right.
Oh, yes, please. A very important distinction. And I don't know if it's irresponsible.
I was waiting to react to that particular word, but I thought I didn't hear that.
Yes.
So sorry. And I don't know if it's irresponsible I want to use, or incompetent, or wicked. Because the actions of Governor Ganduje, actually forget irresponsible and incompetent, I'll choose the word wicked. I think it's extremely callous and very wicked of the governor of Kano State to play with the lives of his citizens. He's toying over Ramadan. I'm sorry, it's a holy season, but in the face of what we have, it's what you say you need support in terms of what? Let people stay home and pray at home. Let that be your focus in making sure your people survive Ramadan by being alive after it.
Well, I would like Prof to make some comments, to react to some of the things that have been said by Yemi, and also to address the issue of the ban on interstate travel, which is something that the Nigeria Governors Forum asked for, which the president more or less granted or bought into. If you have interstate travel banned, however, intrastate travel from local government to local government, won't you also have a case of community transmission? And Yemi, of course, has raised a number of issues about leadership. I don't know what you think.
Sorry, sir, let me add to this, please. Then also talk about the deportation of our Almajiris. You're an international expert, but I'm sure you can speak to that.
With regard to the violation, perhaps,
yes,
of their fundamental human rights within the Constitution.
Well, if I begin with our usual statement that Yemi could not have been more correct.
I know.
You see, lockdown doesn't mean anything to me. Relaxation of the lockdown beginning tomorrow doesn't mean anything to me because repeatedly I've been drawing attention to the fact that many Nigerians, the law enforcement agents themselves, are not keeping to the spirit behind our president's, coming up with the policy. We don't respect that. Now, when you talk about relaxation of the lockdown with effect from tomorrow, May 4, I just laugh that, look, this time will strengthen the people, all right, in further disobeying. Okay, this is the issue. You can take a drive from here, go to mainland, go to Yaba, you see people play football on the streets. Now, in this case, when you now relax the lockdown, which the people themselves have relaxed. Now, I think that when Yemi was making the point that our president, all right, has been missing in this particular matter, and you are disagreeing with her, the two of you are correct. The only thing is that you are focusing on different issues. She rightly justified her statement that the president has been missing. For instance, in this case, when you are talking about a president missing, we are talking about a president who will ensure that a policy emanating from his office is complied with. But by the time you sit back, you do not bother, you are not asking your spokespersons, your ministers, why is it that people are not complying with this? And you now have to come out more forcefully.
I don't necessarily agree with you, but we'll take a short break. Here on This Day Live, the Sunday Talk Show. Don't go away. We'll be right back. And Professor Akintenewa will be back with his thoughts. Welcome back to This Day Live, the Sunday Talk Show, here on the Arise Things channel. Still with me in the studio, I have Yemi Adamolekun, Executive Director in Office Enough, and Professor Bola Akintenewa, Director General, Bolitag Center for International Diplomacy and Strategic Studies. Sorry, Prof, I cut you short earlier on. If you may just conclude your thoughts on what is happening with COVID-19 in Nigeria.
Agree with the two of us. Fantastic. That's the beauty of psychology of human differences. Because we are looking at different factors in making a submission. I do agree in total with our position that, look, we can look at President Muhammadu Buhari as having been missing. And we can also argue that, okay, he has not. Because at the end of the day, if he's missing, he was still able to announced to the nation on April 27th, okay? And he's always being briefed. But that's not the main issue. I am more interested in 3 or 4 critical points. I so much like what transpired in Ekiti State. And I'm very proud of these people. Why? You have the situation of a father disagreeing with the son. The son was traveling from Ogun State, from Abeokuta area, going back home. The father told him, no, you are not supposed to move. There is a law, there is a regulation, a directive, instruction prohibiting interstate movement, which you asked me to also address. But the son did not listen to the father. He tried to travel by night. He paid about 12,000, special charge to get to Ekiti. But when he got there, they called the father. The father refused to admit him, to say, no, I will not take you. A commissioner, all right, under Kawadi Fayemi, was reported to have trivialized this issue of COVID-19, and then the governor promptly, and of course, encouragingly, patriotically, now suspended him. I agree with him. This is a source of inspiration. You have the Ekiti people now trying to tell the whole world that, look, when it's a question of principle, when it's a question of growing, patriotism, defense of a national unity all along, they are there. They are providing leadership by example. He decided to opt on the side of national unity, national safety, national security, refused to accept his own son. That is very encouraging. The second point, let's go to Oni of Ife. Oni of Ife, for instance, came up with the idea of making a special equipment to fumigate, all right? They can fumigate 2 kilometers, square 2 kilometers within 30 minutes all along. And is promising now to donate this equipment to the 36 states, beginning with Osun State. He did all that. And, very interestingly, he encouraged other states, other communities to begin to emulate that. And we also have the third point, the House of Reps. They now came up with the idea that, okay, there is the need to replace the Quarantine Act of 2004. They want to replace it with a new one that will empower the NCDC to be able, at least, to be proactive rather than being reactive. I think this is quite encouraging. So this is what lockdown...
raised a number of issues that came up during the week in Nigeria with regard to COVID-19. Clearly, what happened in Ekiti State, the man in question that you refer to, his name is Mr. Femi Adeoye, a retired deputy corps commander of the FRSC. And I think he deserves all the commendations that you have given him. Governor Fayemi also deserves a commendation for recognizing the man's role as a whistleblower. I guess that will encourage other people to blow more whistles. As for the Oni of Ife, yes, the Oni Risha, Adimula Odua, Arule Odudua, he has also done very well. He has been in Ogun State, he has been in Lagos State, he has been in Osun State, he has fumigated his own community. We would like to see more traditional leaders playing that kind of frontline role. However, the controversy with the Oni of Ife is that he says he has received a recipe from the ancestors that can cure COVID-19. So that's a controversial point. Your third point about the bill that was promoted by the Speaker of the House of Assembly is quite controversial. You have commended the House of Representatives, but you will remember that it caused division in the House of Reps because that bill that is meant to repeal the Quarantine Act is called the Infectious Diseases Bill. And if you look at some of the sections, it is draconian. It is dictatorial. It is, it makes vaccination compulsory, and it fits into a conspiracy theory that people have complained about. Yemi, I would like you to, I would like Yemi.
Before Yemi comes in, you see, my own understanding of that particular bill is a little bit different.
No, when you look at the bill, Prof.
I don't have an idea of the whole something.
No, but have you read the bill itself?
But the main thing you should know about the bill is that it was copied from Singapore. And the bill that was copied from Singapore is no longer...
That was enacted in Singapore 43 years ago.
And it's now been, in a sense, repealed in Singapore because they've updated it. But we went to copy the original.
I'm not aware of that.
Can we have your thoughts on
Sure.
this?
I think what's important for me at this point is the fact that Nigerians have reacted very swiftly in terms of the bill. I think it was very interesting for the DG of NCDC to say he found out about it himself from social media. And I think for me, that speaks to the spirit of the bill. That if you are trying to introduce a bill or an amendment or repeal, whatever it is that you're trying to do at this time, and without consulting the people who are the front lines right now, that for me makes it very doubtable. And he did say that while he thinks they mean well, he doesn't think that this is the time to repeal the bill. But I will say this afternoon, a colleague of mine there was some rumor circulating that Senator Abaribe had said that it wasn't going to see the light of day. And she did speak to Senator Abaribe, who said that as far as the leadership of the Senate is concerned, they said that they don't think it's appropriate to repeal the act in the midst of a pandemic, given the resources and time to actually go through the process. And I think that is quite commendable on the part of the Senate. And if the Senate is not in line, there's nothing really the House of Reps can do.
But do you have any comment on the fact that the Minister of Health reported that within a week, the number of infected health workers, frontline health workers, in the private and the public sector increased from 40 to 113. NMA says the number is even higher.
And it's not surprising. And I think that's the thing that we need to be clear of. So I think a starting point, we talked about this last week. We have a pandemic layered on Nigeria's very weak, extremely weak health infrastructure. We're not manufacturing doctors from anywhere, neither are we. It's doctors that we have. Now, if they're in private hospitals that people go to and lie, I mean, Dangote, for example, was a big story last week with people not sure what it is because there were rumors. Again, the company hasn't come out with a clear statement. So when you have issues like that, when there's lack of clarity, people enter private clinics, lie about their travel history, lie about their health history. So you now have the follow-out effect of that is, one, you have health workers who get infected. Secondly, you reduce the capacity of hospitals to handle care. A friend of mine whose uncle, like a distant uncle, was diabetic, needed to go into hospital, could not find a public facility in Lagos to take him in because they wanted him to have done a COVID test before they took him in. So if something, he's eventually now he's had a stroke, he's now at home. Now, if that man goes on to die, we will not count him as a COVID issue, but it is indirectly, because everybody is now afraid, and we're trying, and understandably so. But again, I really encourage state governments and citizens really to put pressure on their state governments. If the federal government is missing in action, we're in states. We need to put our state governments' feet to fire and ensure that from NCDC's guidelines, that they are providing what NCDC has asked them to do, and secondly, that they are obeying the laws to protect us.
Well, you are a prof. You keep insisting that the federal government is missing in action.
Yeah, indeed.
But I still keep insisting that I don't agree with you.
Which is fine.
But quickly, before we move away from this subject and take on other issues, Prof, what are your worst fears about this proposed easing of the lockdown beginning from tomorrow?
Well, I like that particular question. Relaxation of the lockdown is an invitation to chaos. Invitation to chaos because I liken the lockdown to a situation whereby we don't have capacity to maintain the lockdown as it is. Now, when you now relax and you don't have the capacity to control, and we are all talking about the likelihood of increase in infections, I think this is consciously promoting medical insecurity, and it's most unfortunate. I will advise our president to learn lessons from Georgia, from Ghana, from countries that have taken the decision to relax lockdown, only to regret it after. This time, we still have the opportunity in between now and tomorrow for our president to sit down and see clearly with his eyes.
Wide open.
And then, yes, we should not have eyes and not see clearly. And we should not refuse to hear what is happening elsewhere. Ghana here, our neighbor in the West African region here, also, relaxed the lockdown, but today it's a different story entirely.
Well, Prof, the example of Georgia is absolutely correct, as the example of Germany is absolutely correct. But the Ghanaians are saying that the figures you have seen rising is as a result of samples they are taking before the president of Ghana, in his ninth address, decided to relax the lockdown. But of course, all of us will see the truth, whether the government of Ghana, of the Republic of Ghana, is saying the truth or not. Let's take another break.
The beauty in your point is this. Look, when issues like this are being discussed...
We need to take another break now here on This Day Live, the Sunday Talk Show. Don't go away. We'll be right back, and Prof will get a chance to respond to me. Welcome back to This Day Live, the Sunday Talk Show here on the Arise News channel. Still with me in the studio, I have Yemi Adamolekun, Executive Director in Office Enough, and Professor Bola Akintenuwa, Director General, Bolitag Center for International Diplomacy and Strategic Studies. Now, Prof and Yemi, we're going to take another topic quickly before this program winds down. But Prof, you were saying something previously about
Yes, yeah. I will just put a question across to you.
Well,
I'm not against rationalizations by the government of Ghana. The question is this. If you have different cases, all right, why do you now have to revisit your situation? You decide to relax, and then suddenly you are now coming back, all right, to review that. So that is the issue, to say, by the time you came up with the idea of relaxing, the lockdown, it is simply because you thought things are going on well. Well, you now come back again to say, no, it shouldn't be like that. There's something is wrong.
Well, it's not only Ghana that is easing restrictions. This seems to be the trend all over the world. And I guess that various countries will learn their lessons and do the necessary assessments. And I guess that's why the Nigerian government has said that the easing of restrictions will be gradual, and phased out. So, but we'll see what lessons we learn.
The relaxation is also gradual
in Nigeria.
It's not once and for all.
I originally asked Professor Akintenuwa about his fears. What does he think will be the worst case scenario? Quickly, so that we can move on to another subject.
I mean, easily the worst case scenario would just that we see a spike. Kano is not closing its borders. We're seeing exported cases from Kano. Kaduna alone, I believe, has 20 cases from Almajiris that were deported, quote unquote, to Kaduna. I think my fear will be that we continue not to pay attention to facts before our eyes. There's nothing in the decisions that the federal government has taken, in my mind, that speaks to a very rigorous data-driven approach to this analysis. From the distribution, from lockdowns, the state's choices, it seems all sort of, we're guessing. Yes, I agree. And a few governors have said that nobody knows fully. But I think in not knowing fully, you will start with what you do know. And you will prepare based on what you do know. And in the government's proclamation, I don't get a sense that
well, I like your point about data.
Data, yes.
Adam Soshomole, Comrade Oshomole, when he appeared on the morning show, made the point about data. The governor of Lagos State, the incident commander in Lagos State, has also talked about data being very important as one of the lessons we need to learn. But beyond data, the government, through Boss Mustafa, the chairman of the Presidential Task Force, and through the Minister of Health, are saying that the people must take responsibility. Do you think that the Nigerian people are ready to take responsibility?
I think it would be a lot easier for the Nigerian people.
In terms of their own survival?
Their own survival, yes. And I think it would be a lot easier for the Nigerian people to take responsibility if the government communicated just how serious the situation is. As I said, our president is missing in action. And I think in the responses of state governments in telling people they can go to church and doing things like that, so you say all of those things, but then say take personal responsibility. You're sending two messages. And as you said, if while there's a technical lockdown, people are still doing their own thing, when you now lift the lockdown, what do you expect to happen?
Well,
you have police.
It's called herd immunity. Whoever wants to die can die. Whoever wants to live can live.
So let's be clear that that's what we're doing. Because when you have police officers and military officers who are being bribed for things to go through borders, so the general tone that the leadership of the country has set is not one of responsibility. So expecting citizens to suddenly wake up and say they want to take responsibility is asking a lot, and unfortunately there will be a cost for that.
Okay, we need to move on to another topic. We spent more than 30 minutes on COVID-19.
It's a global pandemic.
And that's understandable because it affects all of us. After all, we started the program with face masks. Let's look at the economy. Recently, the Minister for Finance, Budget and National Planning, Zainab Ahmed, noted that President Muhammadu Buhari directed the implementation of recommendations in the Oronsaye report that calls for the trimming of government ministries, departments, and agencies. The minister stated that this was done as concerns had been raised about Nigeria's ability to keep up with the high cost of governance in the wake of a revenue squeeze. Zainab Ahmed stated, and I quote, "The president has approved the administration to implement recommendations of the Oronsaye report. The decision to review recommendations from the report comes a few days after the International Monetary Fund, IMF, approved a $3.4 billion loan to Nigeria to help in solving its balance of payment deficit, which analysts say could swell to about $9 billion by year end." The Oronsaye report, in 2011, I think August 2011, the Jonathan administration set up a committee on the rationalization and the restructuring of government parastatals, departments, and agencies. That's the technical name of that committee. In 2012, the committee led by Steve Oronsaye, former PAM secretary,
submitted
its report. In 2013, the Federal Executive Council, or the Executive Council of the Federation, as it is known in the Constitution, reviewed that report. It was an 800-page document. And then after that, by 2014, a white paper was issued on that particular recommendation. And the report, at the end of the day, was reduced to 103 pages. But since then, we had the election. President Buhari became president. And it has taken up to about 5-6 years for the Nigerian government to return to that document and say, this is a useful document, we will need to take a look at it. Now, did the government act too late? Should the Jonathan administration have been the one to implement it? Is it a useful document in terms of the details that are now in the public domain? Prof, I'll start with you, because at that time, you were in government.
Probably we should thank God that we are having this type of problem in Nigeria. This issue of COVID-19, which is now compelling us to learn, which is now compelling us to know quite well that political governance has a pillar of continuity. There's no vacuum. When an agreement, a white paper is done, it's supposed to be looked into by the succeeding government. Even if it is a government that is self-succeeding, you look at it. I think that the Steve Oronsaye committee report was good. I'm aware, I can remember, that efforts were made to interview, to speak with various chief executives, I remember that Oronsaye called to find out what we were really doing, compare with the Institute of Peace and Conflict Resolution in Abuja, and try to see similarity, the differences, and so on and so forth. Asked for input. And I discovered that, look, that particular committee did a work on the basis of scientific methodologies. Now asking that, or recommending that there should be a reduction from 263 MDAs to 160, about 160 or 161. Now, in this case, the point there, the most unfortunate thing is that in the governance of Nigeria, under President Muhammadu Buhari, the president doesn't believe that there is continuity of government.
You are contradicting yourself, Prof.
No.
The same government that has taken a report done by the Jonathan administration, and you praised him, saying this shows continuity. Now you are saying he does not believe in continuity.
Please,
I don't get it.
There's a fundamental difference between change and continuity, and change in continuity. Please, there are two different, yes. When you make a change within continuity, you have a policy, then you try to change the means, the strategies of getting the ultimate objective there. You ask the question, for instance, was there any delay, 4, 5, 6 years? Why has it not been attended to? Why is it now that the PMB, President Muhammadu Buhari, is now taking interest in it? It is simply because, for instance, he didn't believe that there was any goodness in it. It is coronavirus now that has created a situation of insolvency. The government can no longer find funding. Please, Muhammadu Buhari has asked for IMF loan, 3.4 billion. And is also asking for a domestic loan, about 850 billion naira. Now, which was expeditiously approved. Now, the indebtedness is developing.
Request, though. It's part of the 2020 budget.
Yes, but in this case,
it's
because...
That's what we're saying.
Yes, now also, the issue now is when you have this volume of debt to be dealt with, and at the same time, you have agencies...
High cost of governance.
High cost of governance. So, it is as a result of force majeure that the president is now, looking at it to say, okay, look, let us implement this so that at least they can have a self-bill. And that is the issue. When I'm now talking about continuity in government, please, the immediate past government, if it has good policies, like the report, the 2014 report of the National Conference, what did Muhammadu Buhari tell the people of Nigeria? What I heard him say clearly, in crystal, clear words, he said the report of the 2014 National Conference is in his drawers, that he never had time to even look at them. He never. The report is about 18 volumes. He said he never bothered to look at them. That's to let you know that his attitudinal disposition to it.
Prof, we'll need to take another break at this point. When we return, Yemi, I'll come to you to have your thoughts on this interesting subject. So we take another short break here on This Day Live. Welcome back to This Day Live, the Sunday talk show here on the Arise News channel. Still with me, I have Yemi Adamolekun, Executive Director in Office of and Professor Bola Akinterewa, Director General Bolitech Center for International Diplomacy and Strategic Studies here in Lagos. Now, before we went on break, Prof had already expressed his views on the plan to merge ministries, departments, and agencies. The President Buhari, he started really by reducing the number of ministries. Now he has gone back to to the Oronsaye report. And some people are excited because they say you need to cut costs. Prof says, well, it's because of the force majeure that Nigeria has, not out of any political will or commitment to running a more efficient government. But some people have also said that, well, look, this is not something that can happen overnight. Laws have to be reviewed. The legislature has to be carried along. And that this is on the executive side. Are there not things that should also be done on the side of the legislature in terms of trimming down and making government leaner and more efficient?
Well, a couple of things. So, number one, as Prof said, commendable of the Jonathan administration. But unfortunately, by the time the report was out, elections were around the corner. So, one, for the time that we needed to do some of the work, and the fact that...
Well, it wasn't just about
no, well, this is my...
There were legal processes.
Dr. Abati, you were...
legal processes that would need to be followed
Dr.
also.
Abati, you were a member of that administration. Don't be defensive.
No, I'm not being defensive.
Yes,
I'm giving information.
But can I finish stating my opinion?
Okay.
Exactly. Thank you very much.
Go ahead.
No, exactly. So back to my point. It was an election year. So, in concerns around saying you want to merge ministries and, in a sense, fire people, it wasn't going to be palatable for the Jonathan administration. And then there was a hard work that needed to be done in, as you said, repealing legislature, setting up enabling acts, blah, blah, blah. But there were some that could have been done because they didn't have enabling acts to them. And in a sense, to show the spirit of at least begin the process. But we did the report and packed it. Now, the Buhari administration came in and he was very clear around cost of governance. We're going to be a lean machine. We're going to do this and do that. But I think they referred the Oronsaye report to a committee to look at again. In the process, as you said, he reduced the number of ministers that he had. But by the time he came back last year, the numbers had gone up again. The whole idea of cutting the cost of government had, in a sense, been thrown out of the window. Our ministers, all the ones we didn't have before, we created them. Mr. Fashola had 3 ministries. We broke that into 2, and we created humanitarian. So we went on to create more ministries. So I completely agree with Prof that it is sort of necessity that's forced this because we're broke and there's a pandemic. However, to your point, and I think this is really the important bit, where we are now, that hopefully because we have a National Assembly that's also dominated by the leading party, that it will make it easier for the legislative part of the work to get done. And also because we need the resources, that they would put the effort required to ensure this is actually implemented, not just lip service.
Yeah, definitely. Nigerians will want, a leaner government, a more efficient government. Whether it was the Jonathan administration or the Buhari administration or another administration that will come after. Yeah. We can all conveniently insist on efficiency in governance. Okay, let's take another topic before we go. The International Monetary Fund, IMF, board approved $3.4 billion in emergency financing for Nigeria to help deal with the economic damage inflicted by the coronavirus pandemic. The loan aims to support the authorities' efforts in addressing the severe economic impact of the COVID-19 shock and the sharp fall in oil prices. The funds come from the IMF's rapid financing instrument, which has been ramped up to get aid quickly to developing nations that are most vulnerable to the economic effects of shutdowns to contain the outbreak. IMF Managing Director Kristina Georgieva said the fund has received over 100 requests for aid from its members, and developing countries will need about $2.5 trillion to deal with the impacts of the pandemic. Well, Yemi, I'll start with you. I mean, this is a loan without conditionalities. We're told without strings attached. I don't believe that because in the days after, we have seen attached strings. But how important is this? Nigeria is looking for money from every direction. $6.9 billion from IMF, from World Bank, from Islamic Development Bank, from the Africa Development Bank. There is also an $850 billion that they are trying to mop up from every possible source. How important is this?
It is very important. I think from a global point of view, the world cannot afford Nigeria not to have the resources it needs to contain this pandemic for the effect it would have on West Africa and really on the continent. Unfortunately, we also have a track record, and we've discussed it on this show, of badly managing resources, which is why the Abacha loot had strings attached to it and how it's being spent to ensure that it doesn't grow wings and fly. I think, it's just more work for civil society, more work for journalists in monitoring these funds, as with any other fund, in terms of accountability. As you said, the strings are beginning to show up. As the CBN audit was the one I've seen. I haven't paid attention too much to it, but I think it's really just quite important that, and again, and I'll put this back to leadership, that if the Nigerian government can articulate clearly how this money will be spent, what areas of our economy it will be used for, it will be encouraging. I don't know what word I'm using, but at least make us feel that there is a clear plan. But as usual, if we go the usual route of just being very opaque about how money is spent and don't account for it, a lot to be concerned about.
Well, the IMF, interestingly enough, is asking for certain things. They're asking for a unification of the foreign exchange window and, a market-reflective foreign exchange regime in Nigeria. They're asking the CBN to also reverse some of its policies with regard, for example, to import substitution, with regard also to the loan-to-deposit ratio, and then with regard to medium-term macroeconomic stability. So these are some of the things.
That the 3.4 billion, right, be incurred in the area of health sector. So
the entirety of it?
Well, they made that particular statement. So when you are talking about non-attachment of strings,
he said initially, but then he said the strings have now started showing up.
Yes.
What is the statement he was
because they attach some advice, to what they offered Nigeria. But what is important in the long run, of course, is how Nigeria manages the economy.
Indeed.
Right now, and also post-COVID, it is clear to us that COVID-19 and the crisis in the international oil market both pose a big challenge to the Nigerian economy. And the biggest challenge is that of unemployment, because we already have stories about companies retrenching staff or threatening to cut salaries or even threatening to close down. So going forward, the same federal government or the president that you say is missing in action will still be the one to deal with many of these issues.
Which is why we're asking him to step up and be the
and that's why I say he's not missing in action, because it's the same government that has been trying to
step up.
The main problem is not the employment, underemployment, or people that will be retrenched. That's the issue. This money, actually, if it is plowed in the areas of infrastructural productivity, that can be very helpful, especially in the health sector.
The president has said that construction sites will resume and that the government remains committed to infrastructure, and the $150 million to be taken from the stabilization fund from the National Sovereign Investment Authority will be devoted to infrastructure. But how do they say it? The taste of the cake is in...
Isn't the tasting?
The taste of the pudding is in the eating. So we'll see what they do at the end of the day. Thank you, Yemi. Thank you, Prof. You've been watching This Day Live, the Sunday talk show here on Arise News. I'm Ruben Abati. For my entire team here in Lagos, it's bye for now, and thank you very much for watching. We'll see you next week. Thank you.